Great, thank you for everyone to joining us at today's event, which is by CinemaWorks. It'll be Owen Maddox from CinemaWorks who'll be talking to us. If everyone could just make sure they're muted, please. It'll be Owen Maddox who'll be presenting to us designing home cinemas and media rooms. Really interesting topic. A lot of really interesting elements. Obviously, we've got design, we've got physics, we've got obviously just general joy of watching television. So there's quite a lot of different sort of aspects which should interest many of us and potentially help us in regard to any of our projects that we're moving forward with. As you'll see, we'll be starting literally in a couple of moments. We are recording this event and it will be made available in due course by a central office. We have a couple of other events coming up after this, so if you've yet to sign up to those, please do so. We've got one which is from HomeLink, which is about the Internet of Things. It's a really interesting kit that has been developed to go into social housing to analyze things such as the use of different pieces of hardware and also air quality and so on. Again, very interesting. And then another one which will be by New Lock Roofing Systems, will be slate roofing, ceramic tiles, solar inserts, and so on. That's actually going to be presented in collaboration with our friends in Wales. So it'll be SciAt Wales and Wessex. So please do sign up to both. And I look forward to seeing you all at those events as well. That's it from me. It's Usman, Chair of SciAt Wessex, with support from Joe and Gareth. Please do make sure that if you have any questions, put them into the chat box and we will field them at the end of the talk. But we'll hand it over to Owen for about half an hour and bring it to close thereafter. Thank you. Owen, you need to unmute yourself.
I need to unmute myself, so sorry. Can you see my presentation screen okay, guys?
Yep.
Right, wicked. In which case I will begin. This is usually a sort of 40-minute presentation, so I'm going to have to crash through. Any questions, please say, and Usman will grab my attention. If you have an involved question, or if I think I can't quite do that in the time frame, please contact me afterwards, because there's nothing we can't answer, really. So, designing home cinemas and media rooms. Firstly, I'm giving this presentation on behalf of CEDIA, who are my trade body. They're the sort of SciAt or REBA of this sort of thing. They're not quite there yet, but they started in America 35 years ago and actually grew out of home theatre installers, which is just what Americans say, the same thing. And that means just under 4,000 companies. That means about 22,000 industry professionals, companies of all sizes, you know, from all the way from Sonos on one level to small companies like me. And the big thing about CEDIA is training, is brand agnostic training certifications around the general technical elements. There's a designer track, there's a networking track. I know because I've got them all. So I'm certified for the job. And also there's a sort of general quality element. So there's CEDIA awards every year. You know, I've got those and I've judged them and that kind of thing. So they're basically trying to raise the standard of this sort of thing. Moving on. Today we're going to learn, what do we mean by a home cinema? What the hell is a media room? I never quite know. It's a bit of an industry term, but it's kind of useful when you're in the conversation to work out what kind of thing people want. Fundamental underpinning design principles. It's all been kind of tested on humans over the years. And good vocabulary. Probably, if you've got a room on.
Daddy gets sold, you take over the business. Oh.
Hello.
Hi everyone. If you could just make sure you're on mute, please. It disrupts from the talk. Thank you so much.
Cool. Thank you. Sorry about that. Useful vocabulary. So probably you'll end up in front of some sort of audiovisual specialist installer designer. And if you've got some good words to use and you understand what they are, two things happen. Firstly, it'll make it easier. But secondly, they'll kind of sit up and pay attention to you. And that means you're more likely to get what you want. So that can be good. And we're going to talk about generally working with CEDIA member companies of any given size to help you bring in that project for the client. So firstly, why do we do this? Well, that's easy. We do this because it's fun. You know, great cinema and great box sets. It's a sort of emotional roller coaster that we go on, and it makes us feel alive and it makes us really happy. It's also quite sociable. You know, I just finished watching Mayor of Easttown with the missus, and we sat back afterwards going, wow, you know, that was quite a thing. And it's not just for the 2 hours of the film or the 5 hours of the box set or longer if it's Breaking Bad. It's kind of, you talk about it afterwards. So it's something that really brings people together. It's a lot more interesting. You know, big screen time is better than just regular screen time on your phone. Okay, put simply, if it looks like a duck, that's definitely a cinema. And that's definitely a media room. And actually lots of good things sort of happen in the middle. You know, if I take this classy media room, make it a bit darker, make the screen a bit bigger, sort of dial it up a bit, that could be good. But these are the sort of two extremes, if you like. Cinematic media room or kind of best of both room is popular these days, because of course you want a room you can sit in, but the bigger and the deeper the experience you can give yourself, the better it is. Now, I say start with the room, and that's usually true. Most projects, you've got a building in mind, there's a space, and let's put a cinema in it. That's usually how it happens. Occasionally you get lucky and someone says, well, I want a really good cinema for X number of people. And the thing with that is that's your cue to pick up the phone or pick up the email and talk to someone like us, because it's not about how many seats you can get in. It's about how many fantastic, absolutely sweet seats can you get in. The ones at the sides, for example, and we'll go to this, they don't work properly because you're just too close to the wall. It won't sound good. It's that sort of thing. So here we've got perfect size cinema for 9 people. Any more than that, some of the seats will be compromised. Okay. There's 3 bits to this. We want a picture, we want some sound, and then there's all that other stuff that we need to do. So first thing, let's work out what shape our picture is going to be. Well, it probably isn't going to be 4:3 anymore. Depending on how old you are, you might not even remember growing up with a 4:3 size telly. Your telly is this size. Sorry, is this shape, 16 by 9, and that's not really widescreen. As you can see, when you're watching a widescreen film on there, it's pretty good. But, well, that's better. And 2 things will influence what you will do here. The first one is the client. What are they about? Are they all about films? Are they, you know, are they members of the BFI? Are they kind of go to the cinema every week before they had kids? Or are they all about the rugby and the sport and the regular telly, but big? So the client will certainly have an influence in this. But the next one is the room. Our example hit room here is quite wide, and it lends itself to a cinema scope shaped screen. That's really enveloping and really encompassing. Given that room, I would definitely do that. If, however, the room is a little bit narrower than you'd like it to be, you're actually better off putting the biggest 16 by 9 in there that you can. So it sort of depends what we're given, what the right answer is. And the very best answer is actually a screen that moves about. It's called aspect masking, where the black border moves either in, side to side, or in, top to bottom, or even both. And the reason for both is it makes the total screen area the same, which means it's perfect. Other things you can do, if you're stretched for space, you might just do a telly. You know, an 80-inch telly is really affordable these days. We had one for a couple of grand the other day, and that's fine. You might do both. Both is popular because there's a difference between watching the news and, you know, watching Breaking Bad. There's different levels of development that you actually want. So in a mixed use media room type space, yeah, both is good. It's a bit more technically tricky, and also you have to buy both things. So that's quite useful. One thing that comes up a lot, even in dedicated rooms, I do see people specifying electric drop-down screens, even in a space where the room doesn't have any uses. Yeah, don't do that, because a stretched fixed screen is just always going to be a little bit better, because the geometry is literally perfect. Whereas the thing that's just very slightly a roller blind isn't going to be quite as perfect. It's not going to be quite as dimensionally accurate. Final thought about screens. In a light room with windows, so more in the media room side of it, a light rejecting screen is amazing. These are clever technology. The material is such that if the light's coming in that way, it will show it. But if the light's coming in from the sides, it won't show it. And what that means is you can have a really quite convincing cinema-like picture, even in the daytime, even with the windows open. And that's really fun. They cost a lot, but they're really good. So if you're trying to get the best of everything, that's one good way to go. Okay, let's say we've picked our screen, we've decided we're having CinemaScope. We need to know how big. This is very much a metric that's been tested on humans because we've had cinema for over 100 years. And it turns out that that green line there is pretty much perfect. That's pretty much reference. It's 45 degrees horizontally. That's about as much screen as you want. So if you have to make the screen smaller, bring the seats forward a little bit. Between those yellow lines, that's very much the acceptable range of cinema. And taste plays a part of this. You know, if the customer really wants to be filled up with their senses with picture, you should let them and move towards the front yellow line. Equally, if they kind of want to see everything a bit more relaxed, then move towards the back yellow line. If you go outside the red lines, it's no good anymore, really. For example, if you're all the way back outside the room where the back red line is, well, that's just telly. That's just telly made of projectors. You just wasted someone's money. And if you go too far forward, maybe like your little kids would on beanbags, yeah, that's going to be weird. It's going to be a little bit distorted and you can't quite see the sides. So you've got to move your head. So that's uncomfortable. You can't watch that for 2 hours. And this is based on science, just done by Dolby, THX, SMPTE, the Society of Motion Picture and Television Engineers. Try saying that when you're tired. And so on. So this is all tested on human stuff. We just need to apply it. Whoops. Sightlines are important. This is about, okay, everyone here works at a computer and probably most of you can drive. You would never put the screen 15 degrees up from horizontal, and yet people do it with tellies and people do it with projection screens all the time, and they do it for slightly silly reasons. It's either it's like Tetris and you've got to get loads of things in, or it's easier to make the light physics of it work, or actually most often people just aren't thinking about it and they just put it where they think it looks natural on the drawing board. And I get there and I go, oh God, why is that telly so high? Why is that projection screen doing up there? That's really uncomfortable. The ideal is about 0. So pretty much your eyes should be about level with the center of the screen. You can go down quite a lot. You can go down sort of 10 degrees plus. You can go up a little bit, maybe 5 degrees. There's a limit to this of 10 degrees, but that's very much a limit of how much you can look up. That's not a target. What I see out there is 10, 12, 15, and it's uncomfortable. And that's just sightlines in action. You know, the front sofa is very much forward of those cinema seats. And also the projector can see. It's very important that you don't get a beam of light that's cut off by somebody's head. Okay. Next we get into speccing it. And this gets interesting because screen brightness, if the picture is big enough, sorry, if the picture is bright enough, it looks colourful, it looks realistic, it looks vivid, and it kind of draws you in. What you see out there, unfortunately, because people designed by Google, is someone buys a projector and then blows it up as big as it'll go, but the brightness isn't there, so it looks dingy and it looks washed out and they don't use it enough. And that's just a shame. They either needed to spend more money or just bring that screen in a bit so it's performing within its accurate levels of brightness, because of course any given projector, just like any given torch, has got a fixed amount of light, but as you make it bigger, of course the brightness reduces, so you have to tread carefully. And I see that one a lot. People who are on a bit of a budget, they kind of go, well, I've picked my projector and I want to build it this big. Don't do it. Work it out. You need to work out the correct number of brightnesses per screen area. The measure for that is foot Lamberts. That's probably worth writing down, because if one of me hears that back from one of you, we'll go, oh, blimey, you know all about it then. And just as important, the blacks need to be right. The blacks need to be dark. So, you know, Star Wars wouldn't be very good if the opening scene, it was all kind of washed out and grey. This happens because people, again, designed by Google a little bit, they find a commercial projector and it's got 5,000 lumens, it's really bright. Yeah, but it doesn't have any contrast. So all the black bits look a bit grey and it looks a bit kind of unsatisfying, and it doesn't take you to space. Easily avoided. And resolution's funny because it's a red herring. Almost doesn't matter. What you need for convincing cinema performance in a domestic size space, so you know, up to 10 meters long, probably about up to 8 meters wide, is HD and a bit. It's not even 4K. But the manufacturers, the big manufacturers, the Sonys and the so on, will all push for bigger numbers, higher numbers, more resolution than you can actually see, certainly with a moving picture. So 8K is a thing, and it just buys us a little problem. You know, it means we need to make our internet connections faster. If we're chucking video around the house, we need thicker cables to do that and higher bandwidth cables to do that. Don't worry too much about resolution. It doesn't really matter. What does matter is compression, is data compression. The picture on the left looks proper, realistic. I kind of want to eat it. The one on the right looks digital and fake because it's heavily, heavily data compressed, just like a rubbish JPEG if you see on someone's website. That's interesting because we get most of our telly these days down the internet, but you don't have to. If someone's got a bit of a budget, they can have a movie server, and you know, costs a bit, but much, much less compression because there's a local copy of that film or that box set or whatever in their house, and they can just watch it. So you get more of the left-hand apple and less of the right-hand one. And the only reason calibration is important, well, firstly, because you've got to do it. You've got to pay a guy to set up that display correctly, just like a graphic designer would, because it makes a huge difference in terms of how lifelike the picture is. But also know that the calibrated output of any given display is going to be 10–15% less than what the manufacturer quotes. So when we go back and do our brightness sums, we have to knock about 10 or 15% off it, unless they're quoting a calibrated figure. All that happens really is that the super specialist home cinema guys that know what they're doing quote as calibrated, and the kind of more mass market makes don't. So you've got to tread carefully to compare like with like. Okay, this is the Oratorium. This is a studio in Belgium where they actually make the films and they actually sign off the soundtrack. So the director is sitting at those two seats you see at the back, and for both sound and picture, he's seeing it and hearing it exactly as it should be to sign off the soundtrack. Now, I can give you that scaled down, not a problem. It's at the very top end of what we can do, but it's very deliverable. In fact, it's slightly easier because our room is going to be smaller because it's in a house. Okay, and the big thing about sound from a home cinema media room type system, nearly all of it is orchestra. Just think about Star Wars, the beginning of Star Wars, you know, when you were very small, first watching that for the first time, or one of those great 80s kind of Spielberg-esque films, you know, Indiana Jones. You probably remember the theme, and certainly if you hear it again, it will make you feel a certain way. Cinema soundtracks are all about music, nearly always from orchestra, because it makes you feel a certain way. Does anyone cry at films? I've started recently, since I had a kid, I've become more emotional, and now films make me cry, and I know what they're doing. They're just messing with me, using orchestra to go. It's absolutely scandalous, but it works. It's very effective, and the better the sound system is able to recreate the orchestra, the more effective it's going to be, and the deeper I will feel it. The other thing to know about film stuff, it's highly dynamic. Everything's like a Nirvana record. You know, you've got a quiet bit and a really loud bit. And again, that has an impact on the sound system you can choose. Regular telly is not like that. EastEnders and the news is all very even paced. Even the whispers are quite loud. Even the shouting isn't that loud. It's all quite even. But films have genuinely quiet bits and then genuinely massively loud bits. And it's all got to be delivered cleanly, otherwise it starts to distort. If you go to commercial cinemas, you might see this. Some chains are worse than others. Some of them all seem a bit too loud and the bass is quite distorted and horrible. And some are quite good. Odeons are quite good. It's a little bit soft, but it's pretty accurate. And loud is interesting, because the only metric I'm interested in about for loudness is SPL, sound pressure level. How actually loud is it at my ear? And the answer, ideally, 85 dB with 20 dB further for headroom. And that's not because we're headbangers, we want to go crazy loud, far from it. It's just, if you imagine someone talking in a room, but then suddenly there's a gunfire, and suddenly there's an explosion, and then suddenly a car starts, and you need to hear all that accurately and proportionately. And it's hard to do. A lot of speakers, most speakers in the UK market don't actually fit the bill, because they were designed for hi-fi and they were designed for background noise, and they don't go loud enough. You either need high sensitivity loudspeakers, or ideally you need powered active loudspeakers, which will just give you that headroom that you need. Most products won't do that. And then the surround sound. And as well as speakers coming from all around you, also from above now. And this is quite a big deal. The way sound events happen now, anything in that film, someone talking, or there's a fly, or there's a helicopter, has actually got 3D coordinates. And then the sound system maps it to those 3D coordinates. So this means two things. Firstly, it's really accurate. You know, you can really kind of believe that there's something in that space, or that you're in the space the film was set in. But the other thing is that the speaker counts are going up and up and up, because it makes it more accurate. If that fly is just over there, I could probably do with about 6 loudspeakers to correctly show me where that is, which means I need to hide them. I don't want to see that many loudspeakers in any kind of space, which probably means some sort of fabric wall system with everything behind it. Bass gets interesting. There's 3 sorts of space really where we want some bass, and one is in the car, and that's really easy because all that happens in a car, you've seen this, is it just falls straight out of the car. That's why the kid driving past with his stereo up too loud is annoying, especially if it's 1 in the morning. Or in the concert hall, it's a very large space and the bass note is big enough to just sit there. So the double basses play or the timpani hit and you can hear it, and that's the end of the matter. But rooms are difficult. Anything between 3, 4, 5, 6 meters wide, whatever, sort of 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 meters long. The bass notes fold back on themselves and they cause reinforcements. They cause standing waves. So if I was to get my bass and play it to you, first you'd say, I mean, you are out of practice, which is true. But also, for any given seat, a couple of notes would be a bit too loud and a couple of notes would disappear. But it wouldn't be the same notes, depending on where you were sitting. There's a solution, and it's multiple subwoofers. The ideal count is 4, but often we run out of money, so the next best is 2. And 1 just doesn't work. Single subwoofer systems don't work. And you tell regular, normal, you know, family people that you need 2 subs. They look at you like you're mad. It's brilliant, but it's true. There's a very elegant proof in the book Loudspeakers and Rooms by Dr. Floyd Toole. I can't really cover it here, but I can send you the link to the book if it helps. Then also, while we're thinking about it, a cinema room is probably going to be smaller than the amount of space you allocate to it on the plans, because you don't want the sound to leak out. Firstly, you don't want to wake up the kids or annoy the neighbours. But secondly, depending on where you live, you don't want the outside world to mess with the sound of your cinema. Because if you can make it quieter in there, everything works much, much better. So you do this just like you're building a recording studio. Lots of maths, lots of isolation, create a room within a room. Then obviously we have to think about cooling it down and ventilation and stuff. And that's very different from acoustic treatment, which is the opposite, which is we need to change the sound within the room. You know, hard surfaces always reflect. If you go like that, it changes the sound. And that's exactly what happens in a room with lots of hard surfaces in. Now that's probably going to be a mixed absorption diffusion panel. And that's one way to do it, is to make cool ones that look nice. And the other way to do it is to make ugly ones. This is just a straight diffuser. So the sound energy comes in and it scatters it in different directions. So it's nowhere near as obvious that there's a wall quite near your head. The other weapon in the armoury, the other big weapon, is just acoustic absorbent foam. Be careful with this, because some people say, oh yeah, this is fantastic, we've got our fabric walls and they're lined with acoustic foam and it's 12 mil thick. And that doesn't do anything. Well, it does. It makes the whole thing a little bit duller. It just takes away some of the treble from the room. If you're going to start using acoustic foam, you need a minimum 50 mil thickness and ideally 100, because then it will affect all frequencies equally and you'll get a good result. But thin acoustic foam is just a massive waste of time. There's other ways to camouflage stuff. You've got a really design conscious client and they want something very beautiful and very perhaps traditional or very sort of minimal aesthetic. Plaster and invisible speakers are amazing because they're invisible. They're probably not as good as normal speakers, but they're very much more invisible. So that's one way to do it. Speakers with art cloth or more usually colour match cloth are very good. And if all you've got is a big telly and you just want some sound for it, then a width match soundbar. Very good order and really quite stylish. If we look at that third picture, I'm not questioning that. I just had to have it custom made for whatever my screen was. And there's ways to do this. CD Designer is a specialist program for people like me. You would struggle with it and it's quite expensive. I think it's about £1,000 a year, something like that. But really you have to go through the cinema design training before you do that. I have seen people misuse this software, which is a slight shame, and they go, well, use the industry-leading software. Yes, you did it wrong because you didn't go on the course, did you? I design a lot in SketchUp as well for sort of visuals. It'll do, it's kind of quick. And the other interesting one is there's a program called Room EQ Wizard, written by my old boss from when I was an audio manufacturer, which really helps with things like, let's say you've got a room and it's 5 meters wide and 7 meters long. Where do I put the subs for best results? Well, I don't need to try it. I don't need to trial and error that. I can model that using assumptions and work out which is going to give me the most even based response at the seats, just by working out where all the standing waves and resonances are going to be, and then moving the sub until it gets better. So that's good fun. And I'm just about on time. Great. All the other stuff. Cool. Where am I going to put my cinema? Well, I don't know, but I would put it near a kitchen and I would put it near a loo. Obviously, films are 2 hours long, and little kids or older people, you know, may not be able to hang on that long. Basements are great. In Bristol, we've got loads of basements. You know, lots of them have cinemas in. I've done a few. That's all good order. Outbuildings are amazing. You know, if you've got a room, if you've got a building with a sort of L-shaped thing, and this is a garage block, but they're quite tall, then either what was the garage or that room above the garage could be fantastic. I would tread carefully about top floors. Firstly, because of all the sound energy. And unless I'm making it very well with concrete floors, that would be interesting to control. Secondly, with projectors and big screens and stuff, you know, any roof gabling really messes with that. But also on a more prosaic level, I don't want people traipsing past through the bedrooms just to get to the cinema if I'm having friends around. So I think probably near the ground floor is really good. And I think definitely near a kitchen for snacks and drinks would be really good. The other thing, maybe not just a house. You see luxury cinemas in MDUs all the time now, sort of more London market, more upmarket. I'm starting to see them in upmarket care homes as well, which is very cool. You can do something really retro, which would really help the people that live there. And while you're planning it out, don't forget about equipment. You know, even a small cinema system needs a rack that's about the size of a fridge freezer. And if you're having more smart technology, if you're having a more high performance cinema than that, then it starts to be American fridge freezer and more and more. Ideally, what I really want is a projection cupboard. Those things are cool because then all you have is a little porthole at the back with a lens in it, and the room is very much a cinema, just like they do in the commercial one. Very good order. On seats, there's just two choices really. You have cinema seats like you see at the back. You have sofas. You also have reclining cinema-like sofas. This job is very fun. That back row of seats actually appear out the floor when you're in cinema mode. That sofa moves forward and gets out the way. That was quite a thing, but it was in Mayfair. You know, they had some budget available. And fundamentally, it depends on the client. I think people usually start with sofa seating, and then the more they use it when they upgrade or when they do it again, then they more have cinema seats because they're used to it. They like the reclining element. It's tricky. It just depends on what you're building. And lighting's cool. The big thing is there's really three kind of ways to do a cinema, I think. You can do it retro, like we see here. You can do it sci-fi. I don't know. I quite like them, but I don't know if I'd have one. And you can just do a sort of classic contemporary luxury kind of way. Everything else is variation on a theme, but the lighting really helps you get there. Clients really like star ceilings. I really hate them because I've been doing this for a long time. I first saw one of those 23 years ago. So I'm just really over star ceilings, but clients love them. So I do them. It's no problem. Here we've got 1930s vibe, just set by the lighting more than anything. And of course, you can use lots of LED tape. That'll really help in terms of making the walkways nice and clear, but without lighting up the room too much. And style, again, this is quite sort of London-y, luxury, Hill House-y kind of thing. Super good, but still technically accurate cinema. Lots of ways to do a job. The other thing just to think about just on the side is these are quite long-term things that we create here. You know, the design life of a pair of speakers is 20 years. Or like the design life of a projector might be 5. You might get a bit longer than that. But this is a long-term thing that's designed to be upgraded. It's not part of that throwaway Shenzhen kind of buy a piece of tech and chuck it away in 2 years culture. That's not what we're about. You know, if the guarantee on a house is 10 years, well, The cinema I put in, you'll easily get 10 years out of, even if you upgrade it once or twice along the way. If you can spot me in this picture, I am there, honest, right in the middle. But the CD Awards are a great source of inspiration because every year we honour the best projects in the world. Three rounds of awards, one for EMEA, one for Americas, one for Asia Pacific. I won one last in 2018. I'm actually going to be one of the judges this year for America, so that should be fun. Haven't done that before. But yeah, CD Awards, great place to start looking, to show clients things that they might decide they want. Control, yeah. You've got a projector thing, a sound thing, an Apple thing maybe to watch the TV, or maybe a displaying thing still. The correct number of controllers is one, absolutely. You know, just start my cinema, please, and then turn it off, please, at the end. That's the only way to do a job, really. Because otherwise it would be horrific. And people talk about app control. I don't think we're there, because you want tactile buttons that you can work blind. That seems good. And you definitely just want a really simple user experience. So single proper control, backlit if you can, good order. And this is just to show you some kind of fun constraints that we had designed. On the left, it's a really formal lounge. It's nice, you know, it's just art on the walls. It's all kind of formal seating. But if you look underneath, it's a high performance cinema. What they did, there's a wooden panel with a picture on it that moves backwards. It's also containing the central speaker, and then a drop down screen comes along and gives you a perfect picture. The other really cool thing about that one, the projector is in the ceiling and it stays there. What pops out of the ceiling, sorry, is a mirror, because the whole thing's pointing backwards and then the mirror bounces the thing on. That does two things. Firstly, it looks much better. You know, I hate scissor lift projectors because they look scary. I like, that thing's going to fall down. It's not going to fall down, but it looks wrong. But this is much more elegant, much more small. And the other thing it does is it increases the focal length I've got between my projector and my screen, which I might need. On the right, very simple, you know, pretty much like my front room, 2 up, 2 down type house. You can get cinema in there. Of course you can. It's not a problem. Put in a bulkhead, use some very slim, flat to the wall loudspeakers. It will even disappear when it's not in use. Behind there, again, the speakers look like paintings. Good times. So broadly, we would love to help with this sort of thing. We've been doing it a long time. We've probably got a much better handle on what can work, and we're kind of trained for it. So, and the other thing is early. Early's really good. I get to so many jobs where the walls are pretty much signed off, but they're slightly in the wrong place. And you think, oh, this could have been a lot better if I'd met you 8 weeks previously. Right. We do good drawings, and we do good aftercare. That's the big thing. You know, when a build project comes to an end, we're probably just getting started with that client, because they're going to have some requests and they're going to want us to look after some things. They might want us to look after their network or their lighting or that kind of thing. So it's more, well, we know you really well now. There's a sort of maintenance phase where we look after your stuff. Hopefully there's some upgrade phases. And then there's a let's do it all again phase when they change house. That's what one's average CDA company is kind of all about. Great. I think that's me. Have we got time for questions?
Yes, we do. Thank you so much, Owen. That was really, I know that you typically take a little bit longer and go into a little bit more depth, but thank you for sticking to our time constraints for this this event. We've got a couple of questions that have come through, so I'll just quickly jump into those. We've got a question from Alex. Can you give me a brief rundown of how the design process with cinema works? It goes really.
No problem. Okay, so you remember we said start with the room. That's almost always what happens. Is first I've got a room and I look at it, and that tells you a lot. You can tell you, can I have a cinema? How many great seats can I get in there? And roughly, what's this going to cost me? There was a thing I perhaps didn't say and should have. Big rooms cost more than little rooms to do, because sound works on an inverse square level, and because big brightness costs more. So I don't know what rough costs are until someone at least gives me a floor plan. If it's 3 meters by 5, that's one thing, but if it's 6 meters by 8, that's a whole different thing. The volume of the room has more than doubled. the brightness is going to get bigger. I probably need to get more people in. So I start with the room, and then I need to talk to the client quite a lot. I need to find out what they're about. I need to know if they're about films or sport. I need to know if they're a family or not, and find my way. So it's a bit like, I think, the beginning of a build. You know, you need to know there's a plot, great, and you need to know what they've got in mind, and you go from there. Fairly quickly then, and providing I'm sort of conceptually engaged, I'll probably start to put some designs together, if that makes sense, and probably 2D and 3D at that point.
Okay, great. And then we've got a couple of sort of light touch sort of questions. One confession: someone has a TV above their fireplace, but have said that they might need a neck brace at some point. But anyway, go back to something more serious. Is there an ideal resolution? And I'll partner that question with 5.1 or 7.1 surround. Is there much difference? I presume you get these type of questions a lot. And then I'll give you the bigger one, which is also will Sonos cut it, which I presume you must hear every single day. So let's start with those.
Okay, great. So 5.1 to 7.1, it massively depends. It depends how many off-axis seats you have. The only reason, and I was there when we did this, you know, literally, when I started in this industry around the turn of the century, surround sound was in 5.1, and that was it. And we were lucky. They added the back two channels just to actually give you a more stable image for those people who aren't in the middle seat, for those people who are sat just to the left and just to the right. And the further wide you go, the more you ideally would like those two back channels to stabilize things. It's in much the same way as the guy on the left, on the dead middle, doesn't actually need a center speaker at all. It's for the people next to him or her, but usually him. This is a bit of a blokey field, and that's not my fault. And so it's sort of doing again what the center speaker did. But actually these days I'd probably have what you've got, Esmond. I'd probably take that budget and put it over me and make 3D 5.1, which is still 7 speakers, but instead of putting 2 behind you, you put them above you, because that extra 3-dimensionality is going to be a bigger improvement than that extra stability at the back. But what I really want, if I've got all the budget and all the space, I want the 7 and I want 4 above me. That would be ideal. But obviously the budget has to go up with it, otherwise I lose quality. So. And will Sonos cut it? Well, Sonos is tricky because it's designed to work on a telly. It's perfectly great, you know, it's fine. It's sort of 5.1 or thereabouts. Making it work on a projector will add complexity to the problem, and I think it's not worth it. I think you can take that budget and use something else that's more happy, because basically a TV has enough inputs that you can switch things. Because even nowadays, when all we really need is something to stream on, well, yeah, but someone in the family might want something to game on, and someone else might want to play discs. So you might have 3 things quite plausibly. Sonos on a projector, that isn't going to work, unfortunately. So you just have technical issues with doing it that way. I wouldn't personally. I know people do, but then find themselves buying little problem solves and little external HDMI switches to make it work, and that to me gets fiddly. And when things get fiddly, what happens is that someone in the house stops liking you, if that makes sense, because you lose all that easy to use element.
So we've probably got time for probably 2 more questions. So apologies if I don't get to anyone else that has asked questions, but I'm just going to quickly choose a couple. We've got one which is asking about a gaming room. Many clients are not interested so much in the projector cinematic experience, but a lot of people lately are asking advice on creating quality video gaming room. Like type of TV screen, what specific items to pay attention to, as games are much faster than movies, sounds, etc. I presume that's maybe this person might be working with a sort of demographic maybe that are really into gaming.
Yeah, totally. There's a few things there. I've got a couple of clients that have done a couple of systems which are, there's a sort of either a gaming station where you've got dedicated seats and probably a steering wheel thing and often 3 monitors kind of for that wraparound effect. Actually, one of my clients is basically a junior racing driver, and that's his simulation thing. He's got a dedicated, that kind of thing, but that's not very social. I think you mean get round and do gamings, in which case I would do the biggest TV I could with the fastest response time. Surround sound doesn't actually change, so you'd want that as good as possible, but yeah, you're sitting closer. it's almost certainly screens, because exactly so, you need that immediate response time, unless it's very, very social gaming, because actually the difference between a TV and a projector has really narrowed. Projector's still faster, but the telly's still faster, but the projector's not as slow as it once was, because they thought about it, so they've all got a gaming mode nowadays. So don't rule it out if you want that really immersive thing, but probably not. But surround sound is exactly the same. You know, the Xbox, the PlayStation, they all use the same technology, if you like, as that. So what we're creating really is a slightly more intimate cinema, but almost certainly with a flat panel display.
Okay, and then I'll just leave it with one, which I think you did touch on throughout your talk, but it'll be a nice sort of summary to a couple of things that you mentioned. Is there a basic ratio you would recommend when designing a space, screen size, room space, positioning of speakers, and so on? Is there a rough rule of thumb that you should maybe consider? Obviously, prior to getting yourself involved, is there something that maybe people should be thinking about? Sort of, I guess maybe a good thing would be big no-nos that you tend to turn up to and go, "Good God, why have you done this?"
Yeah, the big no-no that I turn up to is just that the wall is either built or it's so close to being built that it's very difficult to change anything, and the telly location is crazy high. I'm actually doing a video about this soon. Just go, please, because it's not fair. You know, there's ways around it. You can kind of jack up the seating and whatever. That's an obvious big no-no. As a rule of thumb, it goes like this. What Dolby ideally recommend for screen size is 45 degrees horizontally from the bridge of your nose to the sides of the screen. That's quite a good, and it's a range, sort of 36 to 52, I think it is, but around 45 gives you a rough feel for how that needs to be. Sound just depends. As soon as you're doing 2 rows of seats, for example, and whether that's 2 real rows or a row with a kind of bar area and stools behind it, that's a sort of cheap second row, it gets a bit harder. I mean, there's just what the Dolby and ITU recommendation is. Again, sound is sort of from 30 degrees, so 60 degrees, if you like, for your speakers, to about 45 again. That's where the outside speakers should go. The other one that people get wrong a lot is they put the surround speakers any old where, like crazy high or crazy low, and people put the front speakers up in the corners. That's just wrong. The whole thing needs to be at a certain height, more so now that it's all in 3D. Because if you imagine someone running across the front of the screen for whatever reason, at no point do his footsteps start up high and then go down because it's a center channel and then go back up again. So that'll really do crazy things to your brain if you make the sound do that. Whereas if you can keep them all in a line, well, that corresponds much more accurately to what's really happening.
Okay, great. So we'll bring it to a close. Thank you so much, Owen, for the talk.
Thanks, everyone.
Much appreciated. Apologies for the questions I haven't managed to get to. Please do feel free to reach out to Owen directly for CPD certificates and also asking any questions from a CDA related perspective, cinema rooms, gaming areas, and so on. He'd be more than happy to have a chat. We've posted his contact details again in the chat box, so please do take that down and visit his website for more information. As mentioned at the beginning of the talk, this has been a talk by Owen Maddox of CinemaWorks, cinema spaces and so on that you can have immersive experiences in. And we've got a couple of events coming up straight after this on Wednesday, the 16th of June from HomeLink, which is related to Internet of Things, which would be really interesting. A lot of companies are dealing with this type of stuff at the moment from various perspectives. So really interesting to have someone come in and talking about that. And then we've got a bit more of a traditional talk, which is from New Lock Roofing Systems, which would be slate tiles, ceramic tiles and solar inserts, etc. So it should be good on both fronts. That will be on the 7th of July. We have a whole schedule of events thereafter, so please do keep a look out on our Eventbrite or our social media platforms for any updates. And please do, if you do have any suggestions for any other future talks, please do feel free to get in touch with myself or anyone on the committee to discuss further. We're more than happy to have a chat. So thank you, everyone. Great seeing everybody, and hope to see you at our next event.